Hey everyone, let's just jump right in because today's explainer is an absolute favorite of mine. We're putting on our forensic historian hats to take a massive, totally chaotic ancient battlefield and essentially freeze it down to the absolute finest micro moments of human combat. We're doing a highly detailed tactical deconstruction of defensive warfare. We aren't just looking at the broad strokes of a battle here, we're zooming in on literally a fraction of a second on the Roman battlefield. Why? Because honestly, understanding this single defining microsecond and the sheer engineering behind it tells us exactly how the greatest military machine of antiquity survived the unthinkable. It's the microtactics that shaped world history.
Okay, let's dive into this. Imagine the sky just darkening. Instantly. Suddenly there's this chaotic, deafening whistling sound tearing through the air. Our source material notes this exact terrifying reality. Arrows begin raining from the sky. And we're not talking about a slow buildup, right? This is an instant, deadly aerial threat. To really understand the defense, we've got to respect the attack first. We're talking a mass volley, literally thousands of iron-tipped projectiles dropping from a steep parabolic arc, accumulating immense kinetic energy as they fall. In ancient warfare, this localized, lethal weather event could quite literally blot out the sun and decimate an entire unit in seconds. The threat is absolute, and the required reaction time, practically zero. Seriously, put yourself in the heavy marching sandals of a Roman legionary for just a second. You're moving, and out of nowhere the air is thick with lethal projectiles moving at terrifying speeds. Think about the intense psychological friction right in that moment. Every single basic human instinct, millennia of evolutionary biology, is screaming at you to break ranks, cover your head, and just run. The sheer panic that would grip an untrained mind in this intensely violent atmosphere is completely overwhelming. But as we know, the Romans didn't conquer the known world by giving into panic. What we're actually looking at here is the absolute triumph of psychological engineering over basic human instinct in the literal millisecond before the physical defense even kicks in. So the moment that aerial threat registers, this fascinating chain reaction occurs. Step 1, the arrows begin raining down, but instead of scattering, the legion executes what I can only describe as military magic. They hit step 2, a seamless transition that immediately culminates in step 3, instantly forming the shield wall. I want us to focus deeply on the mechanics of that middle phase, because that transition is everything. It is the crucial psychological and physical pivot that takes absolute terrifying chaos and turns it into a rigid, disciplined defense. It's that exact split second where a column of walking men magically transforms into an armored vault.
There is such an incredible contrast at play here. On one hand, we've got totally uncontrollable environmental chaos, the arrows raining down. Obviously, that's a factor entirely out of the soldier's control. But on the other side, we have strict, unyielding military discipline, the Roman soldiers executing their seamless transition into battle. This perfectly illustrates how rigorous, brutal training is specifically designed to counter sudden, lethal threats. You see, a Roman legionary cannot control the arrows falling from the sky, but through sheer discipline, the legion has completely engineered its collective reaction to them. They neutralize the chaos by controlling the one thing they actually can control, themselves.
Let's really analyze the speed of this reaction for a second. The texts tell us the Roman soldiers are instantly forming a shield wall formation. Instantly. Think about what that word implies. A deeply ingrained reflex. This isn't a centurion shouting a command, desperately waiting for it to be heard over the deafening roar of battle and hoping the men fall into line. No way. This is the result of the armatura, the brutal, repetitive, daily weapons training of the Roman army. It conditioned them so thoroughly that pure muscle memory just took over where conscious, logical thought would honestly be way too slow. The survival mechanism of the entire unit is literally baked right into their nervous systems.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that it forces us to redefine what a shield wall actually is. It's not just a bunch of guys haphazardly holding heavy pieces of wood over their heads. It is an instant, synchronized defensive barrier executed precisely during that pivot into battle. It's a highly active, dynamic mechanism. It requires hundreds of men moving as a single, unified organism. Every single soldier knows exactly where his shield needs to go without even looking, creating a living, breathing fortress in the blink of an eye. The shield wall isn't a static object, it's a dynamic action. I want to deliberately slow down our pacing right here. Think about the heavy, rhythmic, meticulous physical act of those shields locking together. Thud, thud, thud. Every single soldier must align his heavy, curved wooden shield, the scutum, perfectly with the guy to his left, the guy to his right, and even the guys above him if they're forming that famous tortoiseshell testudo formation. It is a calculated, incredibly high-stakes physical puzzle being solved in real time. And remember,
They're doing this under the threat of immediate death, interlocking to form a totally impenetrable surface.
If we really analyze the physical mechanics of those locked shields, we're fundamentally talking about brilliant ancient engineering and structural integrity. The scudum wasn't just a physical barrier, it was explicitly designed to distribute force. When individual soldiers interlock their shields, those overlapping rims create a continuous load-bearing surface. They literally distribute the incoming kinetic force across the entire unit. Because think about it, a single man holding a shield might get his arm broken or be completely knocked flat by a heavy projectile. But a wall of men bracing together, they act like a single, massive shock absorber. They take individual components and engineer a unified, unbreakable fortress.
And this brilliantly illustrates the visceral moment of truth, the exact moment of impact. The texts describe arrows hitting metal surfaces. Just imagine the deafening noise of that. Hundreds of iron-tipped projectiles violently slamming into the bronze central bosses and the metal rims of the Roman shields. This is the ultimate terrifying test of that structural integrity we just talked about. All that brutal drilling, the psychological conditioning, the overlapping rims, it all comes down to whether or not this engineered barrier will actually hold against a massive localized transfer of kinetic energy.
Let's explore the brutal physical reality of this collision. We have the sheer kinetic impact of the arrows hitting those metal surfaces, immediately followed by sparks and dust flying. Because, right, the kinetic energy from thousands of falling arrows doesn't just magically disappear. It has to go somewhere. The brilliance of the shield wall is that this energy is actively stripped away. The formation contains the extreme violence entirely on the outside. The chaos is literally exploding just inches away, but the men locked tight inside that dark, stifling formation are perfectly protected from the kinetic transfer.
The sheer violence of this impact leaves behind some incredibly dramatic physical evidence. In the immediate aftermath, we see arrows hitting metal surfaces, sparks flying, and dust flying absolutely everywhere. And I want you to treat those flying sparks and that thick, choking cloud of dust as historical proof of the forces at play here. It's visual confirmation of the massive force being violently but successfully deflected by this engineered defense. The louder the clash, the more sparks that rain down, the more we realize just how flawlessly this tactical discipline is functioning under extreme pressure.
Now, if we could just freeze time entirely and circle this formation in slow motion, the contrast becomes pretty staggering. Imagine panning around this perfect, impenetrable defensive shell right in the dead center of a battlefield. The absolute chaos of the arrow storm is raging all around it, but within that storm, there is a core of absolute stillness. You can see the unyielding stance of the soldiers, the total resolve of the men maintaining a perfectly static defensive posture, while a violently chaotic storm just bounces harmlessly off their locked shields. Guiding our analytical eye over this extreme detail in slow motion, we can truly appreciate the biomechanics of this closed defense from every possible angle. You can clearly see the precise, intentional overlap of the metal rims. Look closely at the specific stance. The legionary places his left foot forward, pressing his shoulder hard into the back of the shield. He is literally leveraging his entire body weight, anchoring the shield to the earth to ground that incoming kinetic energy straight into the dirt. With the dust just suspended there in the air, a terrifying battle scene transforms into an absolute masterpiece of biomechanics and human discipline. Which leaves us with a profound, lingering question to wrap up this explainer. How does this ancient, instantaneous display of defensive discipline parallel modern combat readiness? I mean, the technology of war has evolved incredibly over 2 millennia. We've traded wooden shields and iron arrows for Kevlar and advanced ballistics. But that timeless requirement for drilled, instant, muscle memory tactical discipline in the face of sudden terror, that fundamental engineering of the human response remains exactly the same. Think about that the next time you consider what it really takes to survive on the battlefield, in absolutely any era of history.